Hi guys, it's Adam from Lucid Pixel, and I am very honored and pleased to bring you the Art of Cuphead, a book I've been waiting for a very long time. And the reason being is, I have a huge amount of love and respect for this project. The amount of research, the amount of love, the amount of skill that went into the creation, the conceptualization, and the execution of this work of art. If you can call it a game, I wouldn't even call it a game, I call it an interactive work of art, is absolutely astounding. And I actually got a chance to meet one of the key animators and illustrators, Tina Nawrocki, who's Polish, duh, as you can tell by the name. I held a workshop at the Ottawa Gaming Conference a couple of years ago where she was too, and I got a chance to sit in on hers and get to meet her. And you can check out all of that here, or a video where I introduce her to you. Incredibly talented artist, incredibly passionate artist. And this game is a testament to, well, to me, to one of the things that make me an artist in the first place. So what the hell am I talking about? Well, let's crack it open and find out. And right away, one of the things that I experienced, because this is a very new release, this book was just released, one of the first things that hit me cracking this open is, this feels to me like cracking open my old sketchbook back when I was a kid. The kind of artwork that I produced, the line quality, just the feel of what art meant to me back when I originally started. Back when I was originally growing up as somebody who was a huge fan of Disney animation, and where I ended up studying animation, classical animation. I have a degree in it. And this really brings me back. There's so much charm, nostalgia, and feeling, and research, and exploration, and discovery that went into the creation of this book. And it all starts with the character Cuphead. And one of the cool things is, one of the things I've learned, and I might have even mentioned on my channel in the past during other book reviews, is when you animate, you really dig deeper into character development than you would just creating flat characters posing for whatever drawing you're doing. And one of the things that they describe right off the cusp is how, when they started to explore the character of Cuphead, which, as you can see, if you've been around for long enough, you can see is heavily inspired by so many different works, by Iwerks, by the Fleischer Studios. This, you can see a lot of Fritz the Cat in here. If you want to check out Fritz the Cat, you can see it right over here. That's what he looked like. You can see that influence. Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, all those kinds of old rubber hose kind of animations and stuff. And as they were exploring, when they decided to make him a, quote, Cuphead, it opened up opportunities creatively that they wouldn't have considered otherwise. How he could use his head, how he could greet you by taking his head off, that kind of idea. When you anthropomorphize things, it allows you to explore human concepts in a way that you couldn't do with humans, which is one of the huge charms of animation. You can bring to life and bring up ideas, you can conceptualize ideas because you are humanizing something that has abilities that a human being doesn't have, such as a Cuphead, such as what an animal would have, or an inanimate object, how you could bring these things to life. This is really at the core of why I became a creator in the first place. And this book is a testament to that. His brother, Mugman, on the other hand, is also a very good lesson in something, and that is juxtaposing multiple characters together. One of the things that always really turned me on to Chuck Jones's work, director for Looney Tunes, always juxtaposed different characters together. Like the Shropshire Smasher, like the huge boxer that was unbendable, this big meathead with this big thick neck, up against Daffy Duck, who's this scrawny little guy, and how Daffy Duck would go face to face with him and just, stand off to this guy and press his face right up against his and say, "You're next," type of thing. And Mugman is the younger brother of Cuphead, a more weary, a little bit more worrisome, a little bit more innocent character. And when you can juxtapose two characters together, this really helps character development. Not just having one character, but having somebody that character can act against. You don't just have a character, but you have a character who behaves certain ways with and against other characters, be them protagonists or antagonists, friends or foes. A very powerful tool that I really strongly suggest you explore. Now, when you get into the secondary characters, you get into the role of, quote, supporting characters. This is something that I teach heavily with visual storytelling in my course. But one of the important things about a supporting character is how they present and act against the main character, how they help to support the main character by telling the audience who this main character is. The main character is very often presented through how other people react to them. And Elder Kettle is the mentor, the elder. He's meant to bring wisdom and comfort, and that's captured in his personality, giving your main character Cuphead and Mugman a place of solace, a place of comfort, a place to bring you home. And you can see that his home is designed using a lot of these warm tones with a lot of nostalgic pieces like the old gramophone and stuff like that, a nod to Donkey Kong in the past, old cartoons and old games. They heavily researched so many different things, from video games to 1930s Fleischer and Ub Iwerks animations to animations that came later on. And they bring all of that together into this. Because this book is based on history, and because everything was created by hand with very little technological intervention, very little, it allowed them to explore scenes and details and historical figures and research things far more in depth than we normally would if we were speeding through a production. As for Porkrind, there's something really cool about how they conceptualized him. They brought in the element of danger into his role as salesman, as merchant. And something that we take for granted in modern day society where, storekeepers, they manufacture their merchandise, they bring them to a store, into a nice clean place, and you have salespeople that are working on the floor and they sell their goods to you. And you go, you pass your card through and you buy your stuff. But back in the day, to be a competitive merchant, to sell things competitively, you had to take risks. You had to go places and take risks and adventure and find different relics and items and things of worth that were rarer. And the rarer your commodity, the more valuable your stuff was, and the more you could charge for your wares. So Porkrind is this tough guy merchant who's been around the block and has seen some scary places. Kind of makes me think of the rat in Dark Souls. How when he adventures through the lands and comes back with these different wares to bring to your character, to sell to him, he's done so at incredible risk. He's a thief, but put himself at incredible risk, adventuring in these different lands to find different wares that were very valuable and very rare to you, as a testament to his loyalty to you as a character. And I love the fact that they integrated that element into his character development. I thought that was really cool. In the background here, you can see, if you look through, what they were describing in the book is how they made sure that you could always see all of his wares. The background was always very visible, with the exception of this kind of compositional piece behind him, the curtain in the back. But all of these different items are kind of testaments to his adventure, the sweetheart that he met along the way that you can see illustrated over here, the kind of pinup girls type of thing, the homage to pinup girls. And you can see here all like the weapons and armor and all these little cool knickknacks that he discovered along the way. Here's a little cool fun fact about Inkwell Isle, which you might have a very hard time seeing. You might not be able to see this very well in the image, but if you ever get the book, you can see the tiniest little indication of what looks like ruins underneath the water, to suggest that there's a lot more history to this land than meets the eye. But you really have to look close. I only knew that since I read it. But if you look very close, you can see these very subtle indications of very faint ruins underwater. Really cool. Another added detail that would go completely unnoticed unless you really pay attention. Just to go to show that they put a lot of effort into what goes behind the scenes. Peter Jackson did this with the costume designs and with the set designs. That King Theoden, for instance, had beautiful embroidery on the inside of his coat, his king's coat, that you'll never see. It's never even on camera. But the actor knows. It adds that level of depth and nostalgia to the character himself. Cool fun fact about Ruse in the Ooze, Goopy Le Grande, which I thought was really cool because I'm a gamer. And one of his attacks, they ended up having to pull one of his key attacks out of the game because it was based off of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. which is a game which was gruelingly difficult, especially when you fought against Mike Tyson. The last fight in that game. I remember that game so well. So they had to pull it out because it was literally taken from that. So they made a little nod to it to gamers, just to show how serious these developers were as gamers. That Goopy would have a characteristic blink before his big attack, which is exactly how you, the gamer, could clue yourself into the fact that this big attack was coming and give you an opening to be able to attack back. So he has this blink before the attack, which is again a nod to Punch-Out, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which I thought was really cool. Something they didn't need to do, but again, when you read the book, it really helps you to appreciate this all the more. Now, when we get to Chauncey Chantenay, I'm not going to get into the full description of him, but something that really made me go, oh yeah, that's right, was that they based him heavily off of the animation style and the quirkiness of Woody Woodpecker, which I thought was really, really cool. Because Woody Woodpecker was a pretty kind of frenetic, high energy, very, very adrenaline-driven animation. And they caught a lot of that. But what that required them to do as animators and as creators was to go beyond 1930s animations and dig into things that were a little bit more current. Woody Woodpecker came much later on in the game. So they kind of tapped into newer animations but blended it in a really cool way with this 1930s style of art to kind of breathe that extra level of dimension into the character. Now, when we get into the Botanic Panic background, this one over here, there's something really cool going on with this shot, which is actually going on right now with the shot that we have here. One of the things that a lot of you have commented on is how much you enjoy this little camera move, this back and forth camera move, to give the scene what's called a little bit of parallax. But what parallax means more specifically is adding elements into the foreground and background to help to enhance the sense of movement. And what I've done, one of the things you notice is that I've got these flowers and little knickknacks in the foreground. And what this is doing is helping to create slower and quicker moving objects. This is done completely deliberately. So the fact that you have this plant that you can see coming into frame right here and the candle and this little sculpture is helping to create the sense of movement. Furthermore, as the camera pans over to the side, you're going to see my little birdhouse plant with the light bulb behind it slowly come into frame. Or the lights here underneath my desk, my little vintage bulb over here that's coming into frame. All of these background and foreground elements are working together. Well, back in the day, the way they used to do this was to have a camera set up, usually with something like an Oxbury camera, which was this huge, huge camera that would shoot down. Or they would have a camera set up vertically, and they would have a box that kind of controlled the light, and you'd have multiple layers of glass at different distances. And each one of these layers of glass, just like all of these elements in the foreground and background, would have a different foreground or background element in it. And all of these different things were carefully timed and animated frame by frame so that, as we're seeing right here in my shot, things would move at different speeds to create this illusion of 3 dimensions. That's how they would create this illusion of 3 dimensions. Things in the foreground would pass by the camera a lot faster, things in the background would move slower. So create this cool parallax effect. Exactly what you're seeing right now. Well, they mimicked this perfectly. And what they did, just to add to it, you notice that my plants in the foreground have a little bit of foreground blur because of the depth of field. They've suggested this with these foreground elements. You always have a blurry foreground element to create this depth of field effect. Again, something that they did with cameras back in the day. And of course, you have to have your Acme grow. By the way, if you didn't know, Acme stands for a company that makes everything. The more you know. Now, you get to Baroness Von Bon Bon, who's made of things that are not good for you because she's very, very bad. Animated by Tina Nawrocki. And one of my personal favorite characters as well. But one of the things that Tina had captured in this that I really love, particularly when you get into this page and you get into the cake, is this very heavy, intense type of rage and anger and, in a sense, evil. Very dark type of side of animation in a sense. And this is something that you don't really realize. It's a very fascinating facet of animation, if you go way back, that you don't know unless you expose yourself to it. And that's the fact that back in the early days of animation, a lot of it was pretty dark stuff. Like if you look at the old Bugs Bunnies, look at the old original Bugs Bunnies. Bugs Bunny was real. dick. He wasn't just a quirky kind of sweetheart. He was a real, like, his revenge was pretty hardcore stuff, and they had a lot of violence and guns and blood, which is kind of very common. People would slaughter their own animals. There was the war, guns and, bombs and chemical warfare. This all played a role in animation. It's a very dark side of animation. And when you get into the character of Baroness Von Bon Bon, her anger is palpable. She's she's got a real freaked out temper, which might seem like, wow, they've really pushed the envelope with this. They're not. They're actually pulling back into the history of animation to be able to capture this, and Tina caught it perfectly. And one of my personal favorite characters, she's just phenomenal. And this cake, the way they animated the cake, I actually saw the frames. She showed the frames during her workshop in Ottawa. And just seeing the complexity of these frames as this thing's moving forward and back is mind-blowing. And then, when we fast forward, one of the things they mention in this particular scene when you're actually going up against the boss fight is that this background had to be loopable, because there's a constant movement moving forward through the entire scene. So this is a loopable background. And if you've ever worked in animation, panning backgrounds are a huge endeavor. Even working in the digital age. I remember when I first started working on the Disney show. I was working on the Disney show. One of the backgrounds I worked on, one of the first pan backgrounds that I worked on, was such a heavy file that I clicked to open the file, and I had one of the fastest computers on the floor. Big whole system. When I went to open the file, I showed up at work around 7:30 in the morning. I double-clicked to open the file. That file did not open until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My computer was held hostage for 2/3 of a day just to open one single file. To do something like this, my heart goes out to you for the work that went into producing these beautiful loopable panning backgrounds. Absolutely phenomenal. And the fact that it's seamless. It just keeps on going. Huge job. And look at how beautifully they executed this. You don't realize something. Every single frame was done by hand. We take this for granted as artists. Everything was done by hand. None of this has been CGI'd or shortcutted. Everything was done by hand. So Tina, beautiful work. I wish I could cover the entire book, but as you can tell, this video is already ridiculously long. I consider this a very in-depth teaser to an otherwise absolutely magical book. If you're thinking about picking this up, this is an artistic inspiration, and it's rekindled a flame that we as artists nowadays can never lose sight of. I love you guys for producing this absolute work of art. Tina, again, it was an honor to meet you if you're watching this video. A huge honor. And thank you. Thank you for watching this. Go pick this up for yourself. Buy the game. Support the studio that put their hearts and souls into producing this masterpiece. And I'll see you soon. Stay safe, guys. Take care.